Thank you. How are you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk, guys. Today we're going to revisit the Anna Kepner case. As you know, she's the 18-year-old young woman who unfortunately was taken from us on a Carnival cruise line. There's a lot here to discuss. Now, guys, there's really no updates in regards to the timeline, the next step forward. We don't know if there's charges going forward yet. We don't know if the stepbrother is going to be charged, but I believe there's things in the timeline that we can expand on. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring Denise on, explore these things. We have about 10 questions, but I also want to go ahead and read some sections and then go ahead and give Denise some of the questions. And I think this will be good because this will start bringing us clarity. And we are going to go from the discovery all the way to up to date. So we have everything up to date, and including some recent things that could kind of expand expand the timeline to the left and right in regards to where we're at with what happened to Anna Kepner. So Denise, do you mind introducing yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Schoenwald. I'm a nationally licensed mental health counselor practicing here in Florida, but also seeing clients across the United States.
Yes. And by the way, thank you so much for taking, I know you're very busy.
Okay.
So just to rehash, so an 18-year-old cheerleader, unfortunately, was found dead on a cruise ship. Her 16-year-old stepbrother becomes a suspect, and the only window into what really happened comes to a bitter custody fight that's tearing apart what remains of this family. So here's the discovery. November 7, 2025, the Carnival Horizon was hours from docking in Miami when a cabin steward opened the door to what should have been just another end of cruise cleaning. Instead, at 11:17 that morning, she discovered something that would launch a federal homicide investigation and expose the fractures running through one blended family. This is the family here. Anna Kepner's body was hidden under the bed. The 18-year-old cheerleader was wrapped in a blanket with life jackets, equipment designed to save lives, deliberately stacked over her to conceal what lay beneath. According to her death certificate, Anna had been mechanically asphyxiated by other persons. Someone had applied enough force to stop her from breathing. Someone had wrapped her body. Someone had hidden her under the bed. And that someone, according to court documents filed by his own parents in an unrelated custody battle, was almost certainly the 16-year-old stepbrother who shared the cabin with her. There's some pictures there of the blended family. Anna had been traveling with her father, Christopher Kepner, her stepmother, Chantel, her paternal grandparents, Barbara and Jeffrey Kepner. There's Barbara on the right there. And several siblings and step-siblings. The family had 3 staterooms on the ship, one for the grandparents, one for Christopher and Chantel with 2 younger girls, and a third for the 3 teenagers. According to Barbara Kepner, the sleeping arrangements were the teenagers' choice. The 2 younger girls stayed with the parents, and then the 3 teenagers, they decided amongst themselves they wanted to stay in the room together. But we had a larger room, and we made it very clear that at any time, if they weren't getting along, they didn't want to be together, we had an extra bed in our room that they could come to. It was meant to be a family vacation, a new tradition they hoped to keep. The family had dinner together the evening of November 6th. Anna's braces had been bothering her at dinner, and she told her grandmother she didn't feel well and was going back to her room. But she must have felt better because she came back down, got dressed up, and joined her grandparents in the casino. She sat down. This is from the grandmother. She sat down and she played a $20 bill, and she didn't win anything. And she said, "Mima, I love you guys. I'll see you later." And this is what Barbara Kepner recalled. And she popped in and out to check in with us, and we never saw her again after that. Somewhere between their casino visit and the next morning, in the privacy of that cabin, Anna died. And for hours afterwards, while the ship sailed towards port, her body remained hidden just feet from where her 14-year-old brother slept, unaware of the horror concealed beneath his bed. So Denise, when a family experiences a violent death where another family is the primary suspect, what unique psychological trauma emerges that's different from other types of loss? How does the family even begin to process grief when blame lives inside the same household?
It can be really challenging because even under normal circumstances, when somebody is killed, you sort of put all of your grief and your sorrow onto that person. And it makes it a little easier to have a vigil and a memorial. This case, it's very complicated. Not only is it complicated, but they're stepchildren. So they're not even, they're sort of his kids and her kids. And in this case, it's the wife's child or son who's now being held on charges. So this makes it really complicated. I think even more so than just if it were just a tragedy in itself.
Yeah, I like what you said, because obviously it is a blended family. So I don't know how strong those ties are. They've only been together for a year, and I know many households that had lost a child, and not like this, but a child that is both theirs, and the blame game gets put automatically as if it's a self-defense, a push away from the ultimate responsibility. But then eventually, through serious counseling and stuff, and the bond that was created because they both suffer an equal loss, they're able to rebuild. But in this case here, could they get past the blame game?
Yeah. Not only that, but what about Anna's mother? We haven't talked about her. So now it's the new wife's son, sort of being held on charges. So now it's even more complicated.
Yeah, and I will get to that, because what they did to her, regardless of whatever the history was, and we'll get to that, they left her out of the memorial service. She only found out because she had to Google it. And there was a recent interview with her sister who was doing the same thing, couldn't get any updates. And then what happened was she was just going on the internet for updates, just trying to find out what happened, because she's kept out of the loop.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
It's a lot there in that dynamics. There's a lot of history there.
Yes.
On both sides.
And again, is it a history that can lead to some form of resolution? Because I don't think. Yeah.
I mean, they're not even letting her mom come to the memorial. I mean, there's got to be a lot of bad blood and history there, which is really sad, because whether they liked each other or not, the woman lost her daughter tragically, and she should, but
yeah, can you imagine?
That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the relationship between, I think this is Heather and Christopher, where, my first instinct, no matter whatever the relationship would be with the mom, is it's the right thing to do, to let her know. And not the fact that you didn't let her know, you kept her out of it.
Yeah.
Because there's one thing of you avoided her, but then when she finds out, you push her away.
Mm-hmm.
That's like an extra, in my mind, just it adds to it.
Yeah, an extra trauma on top of her already tragic situation.
Yeah. So I got the next part, which was the warning that went unheeded. So what makes this case particularly devastating is that the danger signs were visible. They were reported. They were specific. And yet Anna still ended up in the cabin with her stepbrother, even though the grandparents had explicitly offered an alternative. And again, we kind of touched on this too, because maybe they did. I want to be careful, because I want to be fair, because they're grieving too. But obviously, when they do investigations, it's not just reactionary. They look at what could have been prevented. And sometimes people's stories could shift.
Mm-hmm.
And they could say these things were offered, and they may not have been offered. Mm-hmm. But in all fairness, there's no reason for me to doubt her credibility. Mm-hmm. So we'll just go that this was offered, and the teenagers decided to stay. But as I said, if Anna did feel uncomfortable, I would think she would want to stay maybe with her grandparents. But, it looks like from this point, what Barbara said was that they were given a choice, and they all chose to kind of stay amongst themselves.
Yeah, we heard that she was shy, that Anna was really shy. So whether she would have said something or not, but to me, it just wasn't a good situation to begin with.
Yeah, by the way, we only know of something being reported to the parents, or is basically because of what the ex-boyfriend or the ex-boyfriend's father said. So again, we won't know officially until the FBI take leads, but I am going to treat it as if they were told, because that's the big narrative that's going on, and that's what most people tend to believe. Mm-hmm. So Anna's 15-year-old ex-boyfriend, Joshua II, told reporters after Anna's memorial service about an incident that had deeply troubled him. During a late-night FaceTime call with Anna, reportedly around 3 a.m., while she was lying down in her bed at home, he witnessed her stepbrother enter her room. This is his quote now. When I was on FaceTime with her and she was lying down and her brother tried to go on top of her, this is what Joshua told reporters, he described confronting the situation. He goes, I was like, what the hell are you doing in her room? Then he got scared and ran away, and I heard footsteps running through the house. Anna told him directly that she felt uncomfortable around her stepbrother. So according to Joshua, Anna said she was too scared to tell anybody. And because that one time, now this is like a quote, she was too scared to tell anybody because that one time that he said that if she said anything about getting on top of her, he'd do something to her. Joshua reported that Anna told him she was uncomfortable with them being at the house because she didn't fully know who they were. And Joshua did exactly what you'd hope a concerned teenager would do. He reported what he seen to Anna's parents. Joshua's father, Stephen Weston, provided additional disturbing details in an interview with Inside Edition. According to Weston, Anna was genuinely scared of her stepbrother because he regularly carried a large knife. I actually got that story confused at one point because I thought it was a large knife as the kid was climbing up, as the stepbrother was climbing up on top of her. But as I've did a little bit more research, it looks like I knew knife was mentioned.
Yeah.
Weston described the stepbrother as being infatuated and obsessed with Anna, claiming he always wanted to date her despite their family relationship. The fear was so pronounced that Anna would avoid sleeping at home, frequently staying overnight at friends' houses. Instead, Joshua confirmed this, saying most of the time she did sleep in her friends' beds and stuff because of her being uncomfortable with him being at the house. Think about what that means. An 18-year-old girl feeling so unsafe in her own bedroom that she sought refuge elsewhere. Yet despite these warnings, despite Anna's expressed discomfort, despite the report made directly to her parents about the FaceTime incident, which we believe was made, despite the grandparent making it very clear that anyone could use the extra bed in their room at any time if they weren't getting along, the three teenagers stayed in that cabin together. And on that night, Anna died. She didn't go to her grandparents' room. She stayed in the cabin with her stepbrother. The night Anna died, her 14-year-old brother was sleeping in the same cabin, just feet away from Anna and the stepbrother. He later told investigators he heard troubling sounds, yelling, loud banging, and noises that sounded like furniture or objects being moved or slammed. According to Joshua's account, the younger brother said he got up at one point and tried to check on Anna, but the stepbrother blocked him from entering the area of the cabin where the argument was happening. It's unclear whether this meant a separate alcove, sleeping section, or simply the part of the room where Anna was, but the younger brother described being physically stopped from getting closer. Still, he was a kid, probably used to sibling arguments, and he eventually went back to bed. When he woke the next morning, Anna's body was concealed under the bed, just feet from where he'd been sleeping. He had spent the night in the same cabin, unaware that his sister had been hidden beneath him. So, and this is all the research I'm getting. I'm sure, obviously, once the FBI releases their findings, it'll be a little bit more specific because I couldn't tell where the separation was. He said that he blocked them, but if you're in the room, blocked you where?
Right. Those rooms are pretty small.
Yeah, so I couldn't understand that, but that's what's quoted in a lot of the news outlets. So when a teenager or their partner reports concerning behavior to parents, especially involving fear or inappropriate sexual behavior, what psychological barriers prevent parents from taking action? Is it denial? Is it the complexity of blended family dynamics? And what are the consequences when these warnings go unheeded?
Or they don't want to get into it with each other. You know, my daughter doesn't feel safe around your son. I mean, that can cause all kinds of marital tension. But what I see mostly in these kind of situations is just that no one really wants to deal with it. I also see it a lot with molestation, where nobody wants to cause a problem. So it just gets covered up and we go on as the next day as if nothing happened. In this case, it's pretty scary.
Now, is this because sometimes, because I see this in also a lot of cases that relate to like predators, because sometimes they take positions of trust and it's hard for people to believe that the person would do that because they're looking at the position that they're in and not actually the person who is the predator. And I think sometimes, families also believe that they put their child in danger. I mean, could there be a chance that Charles Kepner or even, well, let's start with Charles Kepner first. Would this be hard for him to believe? Because if he believes that, then would he believe that he would have some responsibility and put in Anna in this type of danger?
Yeah, and then he's got to go to his new wife and cause a problem. She doesn't feel comfortable around your son. And I mean, it sounds like with both families, they had a lot of problems with their exes and all of that. They were in court and all kinds of stuff. So now they've come together, and now his daughter doesn't feel comfortable around her son. And you could imagine what that could have started if that became a problem.
Right, and this looks like it's a relatively new relationship. It's his third one, I believe, and it's about a year. So obviously he doesn't want conflict. So I mean, maybe even sitting down with Chantel, he could probably think, you know what, I don't want to cause conflict in this relationship. So what he does is he tries to push more on Anna to deal with it.
Yeah, or that conflict is just normal, because it seems like both of them had a lot of problems within their exes and their own family dynamics. So it just sounds like all of this is just somewhat normal. But I mean, this is awful, an awful situation.
Right now, this guy's the questions that are coming my way here. I'm going to try to ask them as if they're asked to me. So we're going to be a bit objective here because we all have our biases right now. But this is going to be a father that's torn between two families. So I'm going to be in the writing this. I'm going to be a little bit more empathetic. But having said that, it's just an effort to be a little bit more objective so we can create an answer that's kind of more beneficial as opposed to sticking to the. Let's see. So in late November, Christopher Kepner spoke publicly for the first time in his words. He spoke publicly for the first time, and his words revealed a man living in an impossible position. In his interview with People magazine, he made statements that were both definitive and carefully hedged. The language of someone trying to honor his daughter while not destroying his current family. This is what he said. He goes, "I do not stand behind what my stepson has done." That's what he said right here, Christopher. It was a powerful declaration. I thought it was. When I saw the article, I was like, okay, here we go. And then as you read it, a stepfather publicly distancing himself from the actions of his wife's child, he continued, "I want him to face the consequences. I will be fighting to make sure that does happen." But when pressed about whether he truly believes the 16-year-old killed Anna, Christopher's tone shifted. "I cannot say that he's responsible, but I can't decline," he said carefully. He acknowledged the difficult circumstantial evidence. Okay, so he said he was the only one that was in the room, and the FBI has an ongoing investigation in which they will have to provide the evidence to say that he did do it or did not do this. So it looks like he backtracked a little bit from his statement. Like at first he's like, he's going to get what he should get. I believe it. And then eventually when they press a little further, well, let's wait on the evidence. So I definitely see it. Maybe you could tell me is you see one reaction from him, maybe out of anger and frustration or whatever, because what he misses his daughter. It's his daughter. But then later on, maybe he cools down a bit and now it goes into preserving the relationships he still has.
Yeah, and trying not to place all the blame on the stepson when I guess a complete investigation hasn't been done. I don't know. I mean, he's in a tough position. I mean, his daughter not only gets murdered, but she gets, he stuffs her under the bed and tries to conceal it. And now he's still married to the boy's mother. And you can imagine what it's like in the home.
Yeah, then he continues to say, in the same interview, Christopher described his stepson as a normal kid and said he would have never thought that any of this would have happened. But again, not to be rude, but I don't know what the perspective of a normal kid is with Chris.
Yeah, I don't either.
You don't either. So I don't know what normal kid means. That would have been good for the reporter to clarify on that, because when the grandparents were asked about the stepson, or the step-grandson technically, they were kind of talking about things that he does, actions, behaviors, but not so much who he is as a person. He went ahead and said he's a normal kid, but doesn't explain it, and then just says never thought any of this would happen. So I don't know what normal kid means to him, and I don't know if he felt comfortable maybe putting good qualities in, because again, if he did this, what does that really say about him? Because his daughter ultimately was the victim. And I like what you said. It's a to be honest, not saying we're favoring him or not, but it is a very tough situation.
It really is. Yeah. Honoring your daughter and also taking responsibility for what has happened, or some insight, hopefully.
Yeah, because think about this. I mean, that's a good point you just said, Denise, because again, I don't know Chris personally, but if he accepts at one point because maybe the evidence is there, and maybe there's a part of him that knows it's there, but he's in denial. And then there's a part that's going to come out where he can no longer deny. And maybe there's hope that it's not this case, even though obviously it most likely is. But then that's not just about him being upset at the stepson or the new blended family, but the fact that he brought this into the home. And and a father's number one position is to protect the family. And here you are, you brought this into the home. How do you accept that?
I don't know. And I have a hard time to understand that there weren't any warning signs.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, that to me, just, that doesn't quite make sense.
And Denise, a majority of this audience that watches this with you, that's why I did cover it with that perspective that there could have been some warning signs, because they agree with you. They say, you know the dynamic of your household and you recognize any shift. So when you introduce something new, you recognize the shift. But the point is, outside of recognizing it, you have to acknowledge it.
Yeah, that's true. And even with teenagers, a lot of times you go into a room where they are, and you could just sense that they're up to something. It's just like a little bit of an energetic shifting, that, it's very instinctual, where you're like, I don't know what they're doing, but I know they're up to no good.
Well, you know what the funny thing about this all is too? Chris could also have been looking for approval from the boys. So maybe if he did see things that were questionable, he may not want to intervene because he's still trying to maybe prove himself. Where Anna, he would think he may have more control of that. And just, be quiet. We both have to do this together. Things are uncomfortable for me as well. I mean, who knows what that dynamic was behind the scenes. But like you said, you feel something, you say something, unless, you're still in the process of trying to figure out where you belong in all this. And if you do step up, what does that jeopardize? Yeah.
Or just trying to force them together. Like, maybe the crews will get them to come together and we'll all
hoping they solve. That's a great point. The crews could have been, maybe there was a rift, and maybe they thought this would be the best chance to settle it. And maybe that's why Anna decided to give it a try.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, but I'm just saying, hypothetically, it's a good point that you made.
It's true. I mean,
could be worth exploring. I don't want to be an added problem for my father on this trip. I made a promise that if I feel I'm going to work through it, I told my father I would do this. So I'm going to go ahead, spend time with them here, and just try to work my way through it. And unfortunately, sadly, she died.
Yep. But what other better place than a cruise when you have all this fun and games, and maybe that's what they thought was needed for the family to start getting along.
Yeah, and at this point, maybe there. But again, like you said, were these problems that was for them to overcome, or should this been more of a talk between Chantel and Chris? These are the rules that we got to have. And I'll be honest with you, Chris has got the older female, 18-year-old daughter. I mean, this is the rules I got: zero tolerance. Because my job is to protect I know you got to protect your sons. I get it, but this is my girl.
Yeah.
You're coming into my home. These are what we're going to have to, these are the standards we're going to have to meet. And it's crazy where uncomfortability could make you want to sacrifice that a little bit, where you shouldn't. This is your daughter. She's your number one and only priority. And then everything else is secondary after that.
Yeah. Plus it seemed like Anna had a good relationship with her grandparents. So why not say, listen, you're staying in your grandparents' room and the boys are staying together or whatever. I mean, it sounded like they were pretty close.
Yeah, I think they were, even though some people are seeing the grandparents a bit differently because of the last interview they had, because of a lot of people think they were rather stoic. But you know what, to be honest with you, I truly don't believe. Now, guys, I'm just providing different perspectives. I just want to be fair. They may not even have time to properly mourn.
I agree. And sometimes you go into shock, and when you're interviewed, and so that you just get a little bit matter of fact. I tend to not try to judge how people grieve, because everybody grieves differently, and you can't just assume just because they're stoic means that they didn't care and they didn't have a good relationship.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it is devastating. But sometimes I asked my mom this question because she's been following the stuff too with me. And when people were bringing it up about the grandparents, I was looking at my comments and reading my mom, and my mom says this: it's tough when the death happens like not expected, obviously, in this case here, not in the right order is another thing.
Mm-hmm.
But as you get older, you don't get cold to it. You're still connected because the order here should not be this way. But, you know, sometimes you also take the role that I have to be the strong one right now. I'll worry about mourning later. So I can actually see Barbara. She had her moment. She screamed and everything when it happened. But I think that she's worried about Chris now because that's her son.
It's true.
So Chris can't worry about her. I think she's could be playing that protective role. Like ultimately, I lost a granddaughter, but he lost his daughter. So a little bit of a contradiction. Anna's ex-boyfriend and the ex-boyfriend's father have both said Anna expressed fear of the stepbrother before the cruise. So again, contradiction to what Christopher may have said in the latter part of the interview. They described troubling interactions, threats, and Anna's discomfort in her own home. The reporter does not specify whether those concerns were directly communicated to Christopher or simply to her parents. But what is clear is that warning signs existed. Something in the household dynamic was off. So how does a parent reconcile the image of a normal kid with those red flags? Maybe it's the cognitive dissonance that comes with trying to maintain a blended family, the instinct to believe everything is fine, even when evidence suggests otherwise, which we mentioned. Now Christopher faces a new and excruciating choice. On December 5th, he's scheduled to testify in the custody case between his wife, Chantel, and her ex-husband, Thomas Hudson. What he says under oath could support his wife's position or could reveal information that damages her case and strengthens the FBI's criminal investigation into his stepson. So every word matters. He could be asked about past household dynamics, what he knew about the stepbrother's behavior towards Anna, why Anna and the stepbrother stayed in the cabin together despite the grandparents offering an alternative, and how he responded when Anna's boyfriend reported inappropriate behavior to her parents, if that happened. Christopher is caught between honoring his daughter's memory and protecting his living stepson, maybe. He's torn between supporting his wife and acknowledging the possibility that the home he created was unsafe. He's caught squarely between grief and loyalty. Meanwhile, Anna's biological mother, Heather Wright, remains almost entirely shut out of the investigation and the narrative. She said Christopher made it extremely hard for her to maintain contact with Anna over the years. And when Anna died, she wasn't notified by family. She learned through the news. I found out through Google, she said. The FBI still hasn't contacted her. She's heartbreakingly on the outside of her own daughter's homicide investigation, frozen out of the same family dynamics that existed long before Anna ever stepped onto the cruise ship. So, Denise, Christopher Kepner was aware of tension and discomfort between Anna and her stepbrother, even if the full details were never directly communicated. Now he's caught between grief for his daughter and loyalty to his wife and stepson. How does a parent navigate competing obligations like these? And what does healthy processing look like versus enabling harmful family patterns? Now, mind you, there are going to be people that watch this that are going to say the loyalty's already been destroyed because his daughter comes first.
Yeah. But there's really it's a no-win. I mean, he didn't defend or make some allowances for his daughter. Whether or not he was trying to retain a healthy marriage, for his third marriage, that wasn't going to happen. I mean, unfortunately, in any light, Christopher doesn't really look like he's made a lot of insightful decisions. I mean, this is just it's sad on every end.
Right. And the question is the light of judgment right now on him. Are we basing it on the outcome fully? That this, because of what happened to her, they believe it could have been prevented. And in this case here, I mean, do we fault him at this point because maybe he still wants to preserve the relationship with Chantel? So that's a question I think a lot of people in the audience are kind of, some are debating it, but some believe that because of what happened, there should be no preservation of that relationship between Chantel and Chris. At the end of the day, this is what the stepbrother did to Anna. And if Chantel is now going to protect her son, which we would expect her to do, then Chris Kepner has to do what he's got to do to make sure justice is done for Anna, even if that means that you go your way and you go protect your son. But right now this relationship cannot exist because I can't feel conflicted in what I need to do for my daughter.
Yeah, and I don't know that Chantel in this case can protect him. I mean, right now he's the major, he's the suspect in a violent crime. All she can do is cooperate and do her best. I mean, she can be supportive of him, but she can't protect him at this point.
Right, and I hope that Chris, if he does have to get that justice, and like he said, we saw it at the very beginning. I want consequences to be had, but then it looked like he softened it up later on. If the relationship starts to prevent him from doing what needs to be done for justice, then he has to 86 the relationship, because the primary concern, and this is just me now talking, not trying to be objective here, but in my mind, the primary concern is her.
Yeah. Plus, he has 2 other children with his second marriage, right? I believe.
Yes.
So he's got those are the kids, I guess, that may have been with them in the cabin. It's hard to tell.
Tabitha Donahue. So, yes. What we feel now is Anna was with her 14-year-old full sibling. That would be one of the children from the second marriage, with Tabitha, and then the stepson, which would have been Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now this is what broke the silence, because we wouldn't know about any of this unless it was the custody battle. And I kind of was looking at some stuff, and I kind of asked some questions back into my AI system, see what it came back up with. And some of the questions I asked here provided for a different angle. And I want to present that different angle as we start to move forward. And the angle is going to be, we have reason to believe that the custody battle is what broke the silence. But what about if this was strategic from Chantel Hudson? What about if this was a way to hold off the custody battle because she didn't want things being thrown out there that goes way beyond just what happened on the boat? Because remember, you have 2 parents now fighting for how they manage the children in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what makes this case legally unusual. So the FBI has released virtually nothing publicly. So no press conferences, no official statements naming suspects, no details about evidence or timeline. The investigation is happening entirely behind closed doors, as federal cases often do. But we know as much as we do about Anna's death, not because of law enforcement transparency, but because of bitter custody battles that was already underway when Anna boarded that ship. In case anybody asks about AI, guys, there's a lot of information I want to try to give credit. So I go back and forth, answer questions, and then it formats it for me so I'm able to present it forward. And when I'm able to have a discussion, we do go off script. But when it's usually mostly me, I tend to go off script once in a while, but I try to stay focused, because if you get one fact wrong, it's just unfair to what you're trying to present. So I kind of have my due diligence through the different AI systems to make sure that my facts are good. I do my own little research on the side, and then ultimately we come up with a script that we think plays out with the best respect to the situation, and ultimately to the victims or those affected by it. So Chantel Hudson Kepner and her ex-husband Thomas Hudson filed for dissolution of their marriage in October of 2024, about a month before Anna's death. They've been fighting over custody of their 3 children, an 18-year-old son, who's already 18 now, the 16-year-old who's now at the center of the FBI investigation, and a 9-year-old daughter. The custody case was already contentious, filed with allegations and counter-allegations about parenting, alienation, and household safety. Then Anna died, and suddenly that custody case became the only public window into a federal homicide investigation. Thomas Hudson moved quickly. So on November 17th, that's the date I got, just 10 days after Anna's body was discovered, his attorney filed an emergency motion that put everything into stark terms. Hudson stated that Chantel's parenting had directly put their 16-year-old son's future in jeopardy. He argued that he'd been systematically alienated from his children's lives, and that his lack of paternal involvement had negatively impacted the children. Then came the bombshell line in the court filing. The 16-year-old is now a suspect in the death of the stepchild during the cruise. Hudson's emergency motion demanded immediate custody of his 9-year-old daughter. His logic was straightforward and brutal. If Chantel's household was so dysfunctional that one teenager could kill another under her roof or her cabin, how could the court be confident that his youngest daughter was safe there? The filing also revealed that the family's 18-year-old son, Thomas, and Chantel's oldest child had already fled the Kepner household. According to court documents, he left after what was described as a violent altercation involving himself, Chantel, and Christopher Kepner. one adult son already gone, one teenage son suspected of homicide that left only the 9-year-old daughter still in Chantel's care, and Thomas Hudson wanted her out. The custody filings quickly devolved into a public airing of every family grievance. Hudson's attorney alleged that during the cruise, the teenagers had access to alcohol because they were international waters. Chantel's attorney, Melissa Athenson, that name's tough, Athenson, flatly denied this, stating that surveillance video from the ship confirmed there was absolutely no drinking. The attorneys also sparred over Department of Children and Family investigations, with each side suggesting the other household had been subject to DCF scrutiny. What emerged through these filings was a picture of a family in chaos long before Anna's death. Allegations of parental alienation, questions about supervision, multiple children with behavioral issues, investigations by child welfare authorities, and adults more focused on attacking each other than protecting the children caught in the middle. Now, this custody battle became the mechanism through which the public learned that Anna's stepbrother is considered a suspect. It revealed details about the FBI investigation. It revealed details about the FBI investigation that federal authorities would never have disclosed. It exposed family dynamics that might have remained private, and it raised the central question that will dominate the December 5th hearing. Is the 9-year-old daughter safe in Chantel's custody, or does Anna's death suggest systemic failures in that household that put other children at risk? So, Denise, when evaluating a custody case where one child is suspected of killing a step-sibling, what factors should determine whether other children are safe remaining in that household? And how do you assess whether this was an isolated incident versus a symptom of deeper family dysfunction that endangers other children? Because, mind you, the 16-year-old step-sibling, the one that's being accused, he's at another family, so they took him out of the household. So he's being raised with another family member, or he's being watched over by another family member. So the daughter, the young 9-year-old, is still in the Kepner family household. But yeah, what's your thoughts on this?
It sounds like, though the dad, I should back up. I do a lot of these parent alienation cases, these custody battles and so forth. And I can tell you, which I remind myself, the reason that they're coming to me, because there's already a lot of toxicity and dysfunctionality in the family. So I have to remind myself of that, because it gets so complicated, and they use everything they possibly can to blame the other person to get custody or get more custody or get more money or whatever it is. In this case, it sounds like the biological dad is blaming the mom and her dysfunctional dynamics, which is why their son, is a suspect, which probably has really, I don't think that it helped that the family's got a lot of toxicity, but I don't think that that's the reason that this 16-year-old, committed such a crime.
So would you have recommended for the 16-year-old, would you have recommended for the 16-year-old to leave the house, or would you have recommended maybe kind of see if also the 9-year-old could go somewhere as well? Because is the household a concern right now, or is it really the concern is the 16-year-old?
Well, the household in itself right now is, they're grieving. They're going through a trauma and so forth. I don't think it would be a bad idea for the 9-year-old to go with the dad for a while, maybe just for some stability. I would really, to make that determination, I really have to evaluate the family to see but a lot of times it's just, there's no really good solution, which makes sometimes what I do really complicated and tough.
Yeah, and the sad thing is that we don't know what kind of household he led, the father from the other side. So we don't even know why that wasn't even an option at this point.
True. So we don't even know what would be the best solution, because we don't even really know the history of both families. We can tell with Chantel and Christopher now, they're going through tragedy, they're mourning, and they're probably not in the best shape. But we don't know what the biological father, what his situation is either.
Yeah, because I don't know if the 16-year-old went back to the father, because it doesn't seem to say that, because they would have made that known. It just says he's being raised by another family member. So it doesn't say, or he's being watched over by another family member. It doesn't say the father. So for some reason, the kids don't look like they can go back to the father's house.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be an interesting angle to explore, like what's going on with the biological father and his situation.
I'm gonna just see. Is the 16-year-old stepbrother back with his biological? Because you figure that would be the first option,
Yeah.
if you had to separate the siblings, but it doesn't say that. It says that he's hold on, looking now. It says that he's with other family. I'll get back to that because it's looking. Okay, so I this was the different angle I was mentioning. Oh, it's done. Good question. No one knows for sure. What they say is just being raised by another family member. So it's interesting why they didn't choose the father as the first. It just says living with a family member. If it was living with the father, I assume they would put that in there.
Yeah, unless the father has other children, or yeah, at this point, I don't think the 16-year-old should be around any minors.
Oh, that's a very good point. Yeah, I don't know enough about the father, the ex-husband, to know if that's a very good point. I forgot about that. Yeah, but if he didn't, I'd be curious. Something must have happened there.
Mm-hmm.
If he doesn't have any other siblings, I forgot about that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I wanted to put Chantel's strategic attempt to seal the truth because this just happened on November 20th. Chantel's attorneys filed a motion that revealed just how much she wanted to control what information became public. So her lawyer requested what's called a non-dissemination order, essentially a gag order that would prevent both parties in the custody case from speaking publicly about any aspect of the proceedings. She also asked the court to seal the entire custody case file, which would make all documents inaccessible to the public and the media. The motion laid out Chantel's reasoning in formal legal language. Basically, the lawyer wrote that an extremely sensitive and severe circumstance has arisen wherein there is an investigation being conducted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation arising out of the suspected murder of the respondent's mother's stepdaughter. She argued that continued public exposure and media reporting could cause possible irreversible harm to the children and the family. More pointedly, she suggested that publicity could jeopardize both the FBI's criminal investigation and the presumed defense of the 16-year-old son if charges were eventually filed. The lawyer also told the court that the press has been hounding both myself and my client. She emphasized that if criminal charges were filed against the 16-year-old, the extensive media coverage stemming from these public custody proceedings could contaminate the jury pool and compromise his right to a fair trial. She also raised Fifth Amendment concerns, noting that if Chantel were compelled to testify in the custody proceedings, she might inadvertently say something that could be used against herself or her son in the criminal investigation. So on the surface, these concerns seem reasonable. A mother trying to protect her minor children or her minor child from a media circus, an attorney thinking strategically about how pretrial publicity could affect future criminal proceedings, and a family seeking privacy during an unimaginable crisis. But I had to add this. The motion was extremely strategic on multiple levels, and the judge almost certainly saw right through it. Now, this was my thoughts. If the judge had granted the motion and sealed the records, it would have stopped the public from seeing damaging information that had nothing to do with protecting the FBI's investigation. If the case had been sealed, no one would see the Department of Children and Families investigations in three separate counties. No one would see the ongoing fights between the parents or the allegations about violence in the home. No one would see that the older son had already fled the household after a violent altercation involving Chantel and Christopher. And no one would see the claims that Anna was afraid in the home or the warning signs that may have been ignored. No one would see the parents' own contradictory statements about household dynamics and supervision. All of this information is damaging to Chantel legally, publicly, and socially. Sealing the case will protect her reputation and her custody position, not the FBI's investigation. So the seal file would also protect the 16-year-old's defense strategies in ways that have nothing to do with a fair trial. If her son is eventually charged, the defense wouldn't want public statements that contradict later testimony. They wouldn't want inconsistencies in parental accounts available for prosecutors to cite, and they wouldn't want a future jury exposed to damaging details about household dysfunction before trial. They wouldn't want pretrial publicity making him appear guilty. Sealing the file would help her son's legal position substantially. Perhaps, most strategically, sealing the case would stop Thomas Hudson from using Anna's death as leverage in the custody battle. Thomas was arguing a straightforward point. Your household is unsafe. Look what happened. If the case were sealed, he'd lose the ability to use the homicide itself, the warnings about the stepbrother's behavior towards Anna, the teenager's actions, and the supervision failures to argue he should get custody of the 9-year-old daughter. Sealing the case would severely or severely weaken Thomas's entire argument. Now, in short, Chantel's motion was strategic on multiple levels: protect her son's criminal defense, protect herself from public scrutiny, block Thomas's custody argument, control the public narrative, limit what the media could report, and reduce long-term legal exposure for everyone in her household. Now, I got this information, the next part, I got this information yesterday, which was the 27th, but I think this was done on the 26th. But the judge denied the motion. The custody case would remain open to the public, no gag order, no sealed documents. The December 5th hearing with Christopher Kepner would proceed with full transparency, accessible to media and the public. Now, why would a judge deny a request that seems designed to protect the minor and preserve the integrity of a criminal investigation? I believe because judges understand the difference between protecting an investigation and protecting a litigation strategic interest, and this motion was clearly the latter. So, almost done here. First, Florida has exceptionally strong public access laws when it comes to court proceedings, right? So you know that already, right?
Yep.
So you agree with that, correct? The legal presumption is that courtrooms are open unless there's a compelling specific reason to close them. While protecting a minor's privacy is important, judges also recognize that custody proceedings fundamentally involve questions of child welfare and parental fitness, issues where public transparency often serves a vital societal interest. Second, there's a practical problem with Chantel's argument about protecting the criminal investigation. The criminal investigation is entirely separate from the custody proceedings. The FBI doesn't release information through family court filings. The information flow runs in the opposite direction. The custody case is revealing details about the FBI investigation precisely because the parents themselves chose to reference Anna's death in their competing legal motion. Chantel's own attorney was the one who put the phrase suspected murder into a court filing. Thomas Hudson's attorney was the one who specifically identified the 16-year-old as a suspect. They were both using Anna's death as ammunition in their custody war. The judge likely recognized that sealing the custody file wouldn't actually protect the criminal investigation. The FBI operates independently of family court. What sealing the case would accomplish is preventing public scrutiny of the parenting decision, household dynamic, and supervision failures that may have contributed to Anna's death. Almost there. There's another angle the judge probably considered. Thomas Hudson's attorney argued that there wasn't really an emergency at all, that the custody issues predated Anna's death by months, and that Chantel was weaponizing the tragedy to avoid legitimate questions about her parenting. From that perspective, sealing the case would allow Chantel to dodge accountability for whatever household conditions existed before Anna died. Last part. The judge's decision to keep the case open means that on December 5th, when Christopher Kepner testifies under oath, his words will become part of public record. Whatever he reveals about family dynamics, about Anna's relationship with her stepbrother, about warning signs that were reported and ignored, about supervision and household rules, all of it will be accessible. For Anna's extended family, particularly her biological mother, who's been shut out of so much information, this hearing may be their only opportunity to learn what really happened in the months and years leading up to Anna's death. So now, there's a lot there, Denise. So have fun with this, explore it, because there's a lot there. I kept on going back and forth with Chat and Claude on this, because every time they said I wanted more questions, and basically I just said, well, why would the judge approve this then? Why would the judge not approve it? And it just was a real wild back and forth that led to this big section. So from a child welfare perspective, when should family court proceedings remain public versus being sealed? And in cases where one parent's child is accused of harming the other parent's child, how do we balance the suspect's privacy rights against the court's need to evaluate whether that parent's household is safe for other children?
Yeah, unfortunately, though, when this got to the criminal level, I don't think the record should be sealed. I think this is just another layer of all the problems that this family has gone through, and I think it's important. I mean, I understand Chantel wants to sort of forget this part so that it makes her look better, but at this time, I mean, nothing's making it look good. There's reports of the 18-year-old leaving the home. I mean, there's all kinds of situations. Hold on a second, Anthony.
No problem. Sorry, I may have lost you for a second on that, Denise. Do you mind just kind of answering that question again?
Well, as I was saying about these custody battles, this parent alienation, in this case, there are a lot of interesting evidence. You know, the 18-year-old leaves early, and there's accusations of violence in the home and dysfunctionality, and the fact that all of a sudden we have this 16-year-old now that's brought up on criminal charges. I think that this should be part of the record. I think this should be part of the case. And I don't think that once it got to this level that all of a sudden we should not include that part in both the custody battle and public record.
I like that. And then, you know what's funny is lately when you do these true crimes, you find that some judges are overly lenient and they don't do enough on the front end. That leads to concerns later on. So I think what the judge is doing here is the judge is saying, you know what? No, there's a lot here. And somehow maybe there is a connection. And I think the public needs to be made aware because it's also a case that the public immediately took interest in.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree. And a lot of times we try to put it all in a nice, neat little box and say, okay, this is how it is and this is how it should be. But all this evidence is really important to get an understanding of in this situation, where should the kids be and what should we do after all this has happened?
Right. And guys, as we cover cases like this, I think we're starting to see that there is like some, judges that actually do the right thing on the front end. I just want to put that out there because we seem to always attack the court system. Okay, so we got to go back to the court documents again because I think this could have been a strategic effort by Chantel to kind of maybe have some control of what's being released on the custody hearings because obviously this ain't going to work in her favor. So, and then now, when they bring Chris up on the 5th, I'm sure there's a lot of things that he may have now to say,
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is once it goes on record, the FBI, the prosecutors are going to look for this. And I know that if this does go to court and he gets tried as adult, the defense will want to stop this from being utilized. And I think they need to allow this in.
I agree.
We'll see where that goes later on.
Mm-hmm.
So
and I forget the biological dad's name, but you can see why he's using this even to fuel his, his claim is. I would too.
I would. The only problem is I don't know if the house itself is you have two dysfunctional parents.
True.
But I would definitely utilize this because I'm going to tell you something. They're so at war with each other that they'll sabotage. They don't care. Like, you figure if this happened, you know what? Let's take a breather. What do you need? How can I help you? We're both adults. We can revisit the custody stuff. Mm-hmm. He's using this to.
Yeah. In these kind of cases, they never get to that point.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden one of them gets weak and they just go full force.
Yeah, because they know deep down inside there's a problem in this household. Mm-hmm. So Anna's death in the custody battle didn't emerge from nowhere. When you trace backwards through public court records, a pattern becomes visible, a pattern of instability, allegations of abuse, and children being shuffled between households and family configurations. Mm-hmm. Christopher Kepner has been married at least 3 times. His first marriage was to Heather Wright, and we have her picture here. Anna's biological mother. The marriage ended when Anna was just 4 years old, and Heather moved to Oklahoma, a decision she later called the worst mistake she's ever made. For years, Heather struggled to maintain a relationship with her daughter, claiming that Christopher made it extremely difficult for her to have meaningful contact with Anna or be part of her life. Mm-hmm. Christopher then married a woman named Tabitha Kepner. That marriage lasted until March of 2023 when Tabitha filed for divorce. But they say Tabitha was really the only real mother to Anna. Now, mind you, he met Tabitha, we believe, when she was 15, babysitting.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So this relationship may not be legal, at least at the time when it could have been pursued. But that was one of the concerns that involved the mother of Tabitha, to try to file some, I don't know if it's sexual misconduct, but something against what he was doing, and unfortunately, it wound up getting thrown out. And then later on, he marries her. You know, they got married, but that what we're hearing is that she was 15 at the time they first met.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's actually right here. Sorry, I have the note. Her petition included. Hold on. It may be here, right? Is it here? Well, at least I said it, but I don't know if I put it here. So the marriage with Tabitha lasted until March of 2023, when Tabitha filed for divorce. Her petition included serious allegations that paint a disturbing picture of the household. Tabitha claimed Christopher had a history of physical and mental abuse towards the minor children and towards the petitioner, which would be her. These aren't minor complaints or typical divorce accusations. These are allegations suggesting that children may have witnessed or directly experienced violence. Tabitha sought sole parental responsibility and asked the court that Christopher only be allowed supervised visitation with the children. When a parent requests that the other parent never be alone with the children, it signals deep concerns about safety. Will you agree with that?
Yeah, and the fact that there's a history of mental abuse toward the minors, so maybe Anna's not going to tell him that she doesn't want to stay with the brothers.
There's the picture.
Yep, she's not going to say, no, I don't want to do it that way, and she has no voice.
So that's the puzzle box, right? You put the pieces together. Christopher only be allowed. Where am I? After divorcing Tabitha, Christopher married Chantel Hudson, which brought Anna into a household that included Chantel's 3 children from a previous marriage to Thomas Hudson. Anna was now living with step siblings she hadn't grown up with, under the authority of a stepmother, navigating her own complicated relationships with her ex-husband in a home where the dynamics were already strained. Chantel and Thomas Hudson's marriage had its own troubled history. Court filings referenced Department of Children and Family investigation in 3 separate Florida counties. A red flag suggesting that multiple concerns about child welfare had been raised in different jurisdictions over time. In 2024, a woman named Michelle Johnson filed a small claims lawsuit against Chantel, seeking the return of several firearms, including a 12-gauge shotgun and 2 rifles, which Johnson alleged Chantel had refused to return. The lawsuit filings included a series of emails in which Johnson accused Chantel of manipulating and alienating children from their father, describing the situation as a very sad and heartbreaking ordeal. In one email, Johnson wrote to Chantel, "Prior to you manipulating, controlling, and brainwashing them for the past month, it's devastating and upsetting. Please step back and look at what's the best for these kids. They need their family." What emerges from all these court documents is a portrait of children, Anna, her step-sibling, her half-siblings, being moved between households, caught between parents making serious allegations about each other, subjected to multiple investigations by child welfare authorities over the years. Anna was living in her 3rd family configuration by the time she was 18. Her stepbrother, the 16-year-old now suspected in her death, was living in a household where his older brother had just fled after a violent altercation, where his parents were engaged in a bitter custody battle, where allegations of manipulation and alienation were flying constantly. Seems like a cruise wouldn't have been enough.
No.
You know, you figure the younger brother would have been loyal to the older brother. And I'm not saying this is crazy, but you never know, in the mind of just out there, maybe his best way to get back at Christopher was to get at his daughter. not saying that's true. Just you never know.
It's just so complicated.
And then it says this was the environment in which Anna expressed fear of the stepbrother. This was the context in which her boyfriend reported witnessing inappropriate behavior. And this was the household where, according to her boyfriend's father, Anna was so uncomfortable that she regularly avoided sleeping at home at night. So Denise, when children live through multiple family configurations, multiple marriages, divorces, blended families, custody battles, how does that instability affect their sense of safety and their behavior? And specifically, how might that kind of chaos affect a teenager who may already be struggling with impulse control or inappropriate fixation? So both sides of the coin.
Yeah, lots of things. So one of the things is when children grow up in an unstable home, maybe there's a lot of tension, maybe there's some alcoholism or drug abuse and so forth. What happens is children are very sensitive to energy. And even though they don't understand what's going on in many cases, they feel the tension. So what will happen, or what can happen, is they can develop personality disorders. So a lot of things that we see with girls, a little bit more than boys, is we see a lot of emotional dysregulation, where they grow up and they gravitate toward chaos. In Chantel's case, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some what they call borderline personality disorder, because it seems like whatever situation that she's in, it's chaotic. That's just a guess. it's a good guess, but it's a guess. We see narcissistic personality. And what I'm a little bit concerned about with the 16-year-old is something called antisocial. Can't actually diagnose that till he's 18, but conduct disorder going into antisocial disorder, where he's committing violent crimes. And not only that, is he was trying to conceal it. It's not even like he went out and said to somebody, help, I did something I shouldn't have done. He stuffs the body under the bed and then covers it up and tries to conceal it.
And Denise, that's I think is something to look at, whether they're going to try him as an adult or not, because I think he also went out and helped them try to search for her.
Yeah, with this whole sort of illusion that that he was innocent, and he also tried to, what we know is, block the other child from seeing what was going on.
Yeah, and again, did he know what he did was right or wrong? Yeah, he hid the body.
Yeah,
so that automatically tells you he knew what he did was wrong, and then go out with this. I don't know what he was planning on doing eventually with her, because he would have known that she would have been discovered eventually.
Yeah, but kids that age don't have what they call executive functioning, so they don't think all that through. You know what I mean? Like, what will happen, and who else was allowed in the room, and they don't think all that through.
Yeah, and he was he didn't put a do not disturb on the door. No,
and I mean the whole thing, it just got really sloppy, and that's sometimes what we see with antisocial personality disorder. That they get so caught up in the crime that they forget about all these these other details that lead the police investigators right to them.
Yeah, because what happened in that room? I mean, from unfortunately killing her, if that's the case, and then hiding. There's so much there, and then the next day, I'm curious to see when I hope they talk about that. I'm curious to see what happened in that cabin, from how she died specifically, like what happened, and then hiding the body, because you may have the younger brother. 14. I mean, I don't know how the rooms were laid out. How did he not witness that, or was he threatened to keep quiet?
True. That I would think is a good guess.
Yeah, because it's such a closed, confined area. I don't know how the room looks. If somebody wants to email me some pictures, but how do we know that this all happened? And I'm assuming, that's his sister. So I'm assuming they're 14, he's 16. I don't think he would be that fearful of them, or he could be, based on what people have said about him carrying a knife. So we don't know if he forced him to be quiet. We just don't know. But
yeah. And the mental abuse and manipulation, he might not have had a choice.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because they said that the sibling could be a witness. So I'm curious to see when they talk to him what he saw, what he said, and was he coerced not to say something? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think it's possible.
Yeah. So I have the December hearing. The December 5th custody hearing has become something much larger than a standard custody evaluation. It's now the primary public mechanism through which information about Anna's death might be revealed. The FBI isn't holding press conferences. The medical examiner released only the bare minimum required by law. Cause of death, but no manner of death, no narrative what happened. But in family court under oath, Christopher Kepner will have to answer questions. By the way, I believe Anna has been cremated since this moment. They had the memorial. I think she was cremated. Thomas Hudson's attorney, Scott Smith, will be conducting that questioning, and he has every incentive to portray Chantel's household as unsafe. The questions are likely to probe deep into family dynamics and decisions. So they're going to go after Chris, because Chris is part of that dynamic now.
Yep.
So he may want to break. I wouldn't be shocked if he breaks up with Chantel right before all this happens and says, I'm not even involved in her life. Yeah, so too late. Yeah, she won't be living with me now. So, is that possible that he could break up with Chantel right before the December 5th hearing, and now he's no longer a factor in all this?
Well, he could break up with her, but he's still going to, he's not going to get out of this. He's going to be questioned because, his parental stability certainly is questionable. Plus, he has a history of mental abuse toward minors, and
they could question her choice. And he happens to be a choice. Because I'm thinking, if I was him and I didn't want my background exposed, I would probably strategically break up with her. We don't live together, in the hopes that they don't worry about this household anymore. But either way, she's a choice.
Yeah, and a clever attorney is going to interview or subpoena the other marriages, and they're going to get a lot of history on him. Trust me, even in contentious divorces, everybody gets pulled in.
So we'll know more, and I think there's more to tell. So
There will-
what did Christopher know about the inappropriate behavior Anna's ex-boyfriend reported? When did he first learn about the FaceTime incident where the stepbrother tried to get on top of Anna? How did he respond? Was there a conversation with the stepbrother about appropriate boundaries? Were rules established about the stepbrother being alone with Anna? Remember, they have a younger girl too, so how he raised his girl, what happened to Anna could Thomas Hudson could utilize that. Well, I have a 9-year-old girl too.
Yeah.
Why did the teenagers stay in that cabin together? The grandparents made it very clear that they had an extra bed and anyone could come to their room at any time if they weren't getting along. They didn't want to be together, etc. Why didn't Anna use that option? Did the adults check on the teenagers during the night? Was there an expectation that adults would monitor the situation? What happened that final evening? Anna left dinner saying she felt sick. She came back down to the casino. Who was with her? Where was the stepbrother? When did she return to the cabin? What was the supervision at that point? Were there previous incidents involving the stepbrother that raised red flags? Had there been complaints from Anna or others about his behavior? Had school counselors or teachers expressed concerns? Were there any police calls ever to the home? These aren't just custody evaluation questions. They're questions that go to the heart of foreseeability, negligence, and whether Anna's death was a shocking tragedy or the culmination of warning signs that adults chose to ignore. Now, Chantel's attorney has already indicated that Chantel will not testify, citing Fifth Amendment concerns. The attorney stated during on November 21st hearing that the respondent has been advised through discussions with FBI investigators and her attorney that a criminal case may be initiated against one of the minor children and that testifying could be prejudicial to her on her or her adolescent child. That this is Chantel's constitutional right. She cannot be compelled to testify if doing so might incriminate her or her son. But there's the problem. Here's the problem. In custody proceedings, judges view parental refusal to testify very unfavorably. If you're asking for custody of children and you won't answer questions under oath about your household, that silence speaks volumes. It suggests you have something to hide. It undermines your credibility. And in a case where the central question is whether your home is safe for children, refusing to testify about your parenting and supervision is a significant strategic problem. Because again, one is for criminal charges. The other is, can I trust you enough to put the kids back in your home? And when you don't want to say nothing, that doesn't give me enough information to make that decision.
Yeah, I still think regardless of whether she testifies or not, there's a lot of other people that they can subpoena that will put the puzzle together. Again, you don't need to have every piece. You just need to have most of the puzzle pieces to make a pretty good conclusion.
Right. Now, the other major unknown is whether the 16-year-old stepbrother will be called to testify. During the November 21st hearing, Judge Michelle Studstill specifically raised concerns about putting the teenager on the stand. Thomas Hudson attorney initially suggested he might call the boy to testify about household conditions, but Chantel's attorney strongly objected, stating, I don't want anything being done that could incriminate the young man. By late November, Hudson's attorney indicated he would likely not call the teenager after all. So there's a mutual concern because the father also doesn't want to incriminate his son. But now, wow, it's such a complicated dynamic. This makes sense from a legal perspective. The Fifth Amendment protects the teen from being compelled to testify about matters that could incriminate him in a criminal case. But it also means the December 5th hearing won't include direct testimony from one of the only two people who actually know what happened in that cabin. What the hearing might reveal instead are the broader circumstances, the family dynamics, the warning signs, the parental decisions, the supervision failures, and ultimately it will help the judge answer the question that matters most for custody purposes. Is the 9-year-old daughter safe in Chantel's home, or does Anna's death suggest such fundamental problems with supervision and household management that the youngest child needs to be removed? So Denise, in custody evaluations following a death in the family where another child is suspected, what specific assessments should be done? And how do you evaluate whether a parent's supervision failures were criminal, neglect, poor judgment, or simply the unfortunate reality that teenagers can deceive even attentive parents?
If I were on this case, I would want to meet with the 9-year-old little girl. And I would want to get a good understanding of where she would feel the most comfortable. One thing you can count on with children is they're so sweet and they're so innocent and honest, and they'll give you a really good understanding of whether they feel safer with the dad or they really want to stay with the mom or something like that. And I think it would be important to get a good understanding of how the child's feeling to put them in the best situation possible.
Yeah, and it is unique too, where, as I mentioned, the not having the 16-year-old speak either. You know, the Thomas Hudson, you won't be able to get any view of that household because
You
now
mean the 18-year-old or the one?
no, the 16-year-old that they would be concerned that he would say something, but both parents have that same concern.
Mm-hmm.
So, and to be honest with you, even though the father would push his argument, he's going to push not the argument about his son being dangerous, but rather there is no proper supervision. And that's a different argument, right?
Well, but not giving somebody proper supervision, usually, kids don't always commit murder. I mean,
Right.
he's got a point, but I mean, the fact that he's trying to blame the ex-wife that, the child wouldn't have been murdered if she were a better parent, to me, that's a little weak.
So,
Yes.
right. So I could see Chris. So here's the funny thing. That may be a safe argument for Tim, the husband, to try to push against Chantel because they're both going to want to protect the son.
Yeah.
But I could see if somewhere along that line they start talking about this and that question goes towards Chris Kepner, I could see Chris saying, well, wait a second. You want to talk about supervision? We don't, like you said, a normal kid doesn't kill another kid.
Exactly.
So that they got to be very careful with questions they ask him because now they want to expose the dynamic of that household, knowing a centerpiece of that is going to be that 16-year-old boy that they both want to protect. And that could be a good spot for Chris to deflect.
Yeah. I just imagine there's a lot of evidence against a 16-year-old that they can get outside the family dynamics through the school, through neighbors. I bet there's a lot, friends. I bet there's a lot there.
So, I mean, you're right. And if I was on the stand, I was Chris, and I feel that at one point I am getting personally attacked. I mean, you give me an area to deflect to, though. So I don't see it as being something where Chris would be as involved in protecting Hudson, the son. I could see that could be a concern too. There's 3 more sections left, almost wrapped up.
Okay.
So 3 more questions technically. So 3 weeks after Anna's body was discovered, the FBI still hasn't announced charges. Anna's aunt, Crystal Wright, spoke for the entire extended family. So that's the mother's sister, the biological mother. That's one. She's not in the loop either. That's Heather Wright's sister. I saw an interview with her. Her name's Crystal Wright. She spoke for the entire extended family when she told reporters they're really quiet. They don't say anything. My sister can't even get any information from them. We don't understand why, if this boy is a suspect, why he hasn't been charged yet. What's happening there? The answer lies in the unique complexity of federal maritime prosecution, especially those involving juvenile suspects. When a crime occurs on a cruise ship in international waters, it falls under federal jurisdiction, specifically the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida. These cases don't move at the pace of typical state prosecutions. The FBI had to board the Carnival Horizon when it returned to Port Miami on the 8th of November and conducted comprehensive forensic examination of the crime scene. That meant processing every inch of the cabin where Anna died, collecting fibers from the blanket she was wrapped in, analyzing potential DNA evidence on the life jackets that covered her body, documenting bruising patterns and injury evidence that could indicate how mechanical asphyxiation was achieved, downloading key card access, records that show who entered and exited the cabin and when, and pulling surveillance footage from cameras throughout the ship. Now, all that evidence has to be analyzed in FBI laboratories. The medical examiner's findings have to be thoroughly reviewed and documented. Witnesses' interviews have to be conducted and statements verified. Federal prosecutors won't bring charges until they're confident the evidence supports a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. But here's where this case takes on an additional layer of complexity that could significantly affect the charging decision. There are serious concerns about what happened after Anna died. According to multiple sources, the 16-year-old stepbrother didn't just kill Anna and leave her body where it fell. He wrapped her in a blanket. He covered her with life jackets. He concealed her body under the bed. And then this is the detail that suggests premeditation and conscience of guilt. He apparently went about his activities on the ship the next day as if nothing had happened. Think about what that means from a prosecutor's perspective. If Anna died in a moment of rage or panic, a fight that escalated, a loss of control, you might expect the teenager to immediately break down, to call for help, to show visible distress. Instead, there's evidence suggesting he actively concealed what he'd done and then maintained that concealment through the next day. The fact that Anna left dinner saying she felt sick, then came back out to go to the casino with family, and at some point after that ended up dead in the cabin, creates a timeline prosecutors will scrutinize carefully. When did she return to the cabin? Was the stepbrother there? What happened in those hours? The concealment and the apparent normalcy the next day speaks to planning, to awareness of wrongdoing. to an ability to control his behavior and present a false front, even while knowing Anna's body was hidden under the bed. This is precisely the kind of evidence that weighs heavily when prosecutors decide whether to try a juvenile as an adult. Under federal law, juveniles aged 16 and older can be transferred to adult court for serious violent felonies. If the government can demonstrate that transfer serves the interest of justice, the factors courts consider include the sophistication and maturity of the juvenile. Can a 16-year-old who conceals a body and maintain a facade of normalcy the next day be considered immature or naive? The nature and circumstances of the offense. Mechanical asphyxiation requires sustained force. It's not a momentary loss of control, and the concealment suggests planning. The juvenile's prior record. We don't know yet whether the 16-year-old has previous involvement with law enforcement, though the multiple DCF investigations suggest there may have been prior concerns about his behavior. Whether rehabilitation is realistic through juvenile facilities, if he's capable of killing and then concealing evidence while functioning normally around family members, what does that say about his amenability to treatment in the juvenile setting and the protection of the public? Are other children safe around him? If prosecuted as a juvenile, the emphasis would be on rehabilitation rather than punishment. The case would be handled with more confidentiality. Maximum detention would typically last until age 21, potentially extended to 25 in some circumstances, but the focus would be on treatment, counseling, and education. If transferred to adult court and convicted of federal maritime murder, the teenager faces the possibility of life in prison. The death penalty is not an option for someone who's at 16 at the time of the offense, but the consequences are still catastrophic and permanent. And the concealment of Anna's body and the apparent ability to continue functioning normally the next day while her body lay hidden, these details could be the difference between a juvenile prosecution focused on rehabilitation and an adult prosecution where a life sentence is on the table. So, Denise, there's a lot there. When a teenager is suspected of a violent crime but not yet charged, what kind of therapeutic intervention is appropriate? And how do you balance the trauma he's experienced, including potentially being the cause of someone's death, with the need to protect others and assess dangerousness?
When you're trying to understand whether somebody can be rehabilitated versus whether they should go into some sort of prison or jail or something like that, we're trying to understand whether or not they lack empathy. And empathy is when you don't do something because you know it's wrong. And in this case, not only did he do something violent, but then he hid it up and he pretended he had nothing to do with it. This is not something that you can rehab. This is not something you can cure. This is not something you can educate. I mean, it all sounds great, but realistically, it's not possible. It's like trying to give somebody a skill that they just are not ever going to have.
Yeah, by the way, an update just came in. It said cheerleader who died on cruise ship fought for her life as feds weighed possible charges for stepbrother. Do you have a second? I could show this. It just came in.
Sure.
All right, hold on one second, guys. Let me pause this.